when I say that Bigfoot does not exist, it's because I believe that we haven't found sufficient evidence to make the statement that Bigfoot does exist.
I know it's there.
Is this a real thing? Are there Sasquatches out there?
These stories have been passed down through generations, embellished by the media, and embraced by a fervent subculture of believers. But what truth lies behind these tales? In a world where every mystery seems just one technological leap away from a solution, the existence of Bigfoot remains as mysterious as ever. Why? Despite decades of searching, do we still have no definitive proof? No bones, no DNA, no undeniable photographic evidence. Could it be that the answer is simpler than we think?
I'm Michael J. Epstein. I'm the author of the book Bigfoot Does Not Exist. A lot of Bigfoot enthusiasts might be offended by that title initially, but the reason I called the book Bigfoot Does Not Exist is actually because I have a great affinity for Bigfoot. I think Bigfoot is a wonderful creature, very, very interesting. And in fact, I'm very eager for someone to have very strong evidence that Bigfoot does exist.
Armed with critical thinking, we embark on a quest, not just through the physical wilderness, but through the vast, often impenetrable wilds of human belief and folklore.
I believe that we all have an obligation to the fundamental rules of science when we're examining something, when we're trying to find evidence of something.
Our journey here will challenge the myths, dissect the evidence, and explore the psychological allure of one of the greatest and most enduring legends of North American folklore.
After years of having my own personal interest and interviewing guests on my podcast, I am absolutely convinced that many of these anecdotal stories of eyewitness accounts of Bigfoot are indeed real.
The reason that I believe in Bigfoot is because it's easier to believe in something that we can't see, touch, or smell than to come up with an explanation for all of this.
In Search Of was a big influence, watching that show every week and talking about things like the Abominable Snowman and Bigfoot, and that really sparked my interest. I mean, I already had an interest in monsters, and here we have a real-life monster, so that was pretty exciting for a kid.
I wouldn't say I 100% disbelieve in Bigfoot. I think there maybe perhaps is a small margin there where he could exist. It's getting less and less likely.
As we peel back the layers on the stories and sightings, we confront a compelling question. Is Bigfoot a remnant of our primordial past, a creature that has somehow evaded capture and comprehension? Or is it something else entirely? This is not just a quest for a creature. It is an exploration into the depths of human nature and our place in the natural world. It is a journey that questions not just the existence of Bigfoot, but the boundaries of human belief and the enduring mystery of the unknown. From grainy photographs to eyewitness accounts, the evidence for Bigfoot has piled up over the decades, yet the scientific community remains largely unconvinced.
Within the realm of science, the way that this works is we have something called burden of proof. And burden of proof means that the person who is making the claim is the one who is required to provide evidence. So in other words, an example of a claim would be that Bigfoot does exist, so that we can find Bigfoot, we know that Bigfoot is out there.
The reasons for this rejection are rooted deeply in the fundamentals of scientific inquiry, the absence of verifiable evidence, ecological improbabilities, and the implausibility of such a creature remaining undetected in this age of advanced scientific tools and techniques.
I would argue that we have as conclusive evidence as we'll ever get without getting a body that there is something to this. There has been scat, there has been hair, there have been bones that when tested come back to no known primate. They don't know what species it comes from.
If, let's just say for the sake of argument, there is a Bigfoot or Bigfoots in the Pacific Northwest. It is a large area. There's a lot of it that is hard to be explored. The closest animal I can think of that would be close to Bigfoot would be a gorilla. Let's say a mountain gorilla or a lowland gorilla. A gorilla troop is very easy to track. They would make their beds, and they would just decimate the foliage. A male silverback can consume 60 pounds of food a day. Bigfoot would be roughly twice the size of a gorilla. A gorilla's about 5.5 to 6 feet tall, 300 or 400, 500 pounds. I've heard Bigfoot can be 12 feet tall and even more. So if you ramp all that up, you would assume an animal of that size would be consuming maybe 100 pounds of food a day. You take that number and that volume and you multiply it by the number needed to perpetuate the species. That's a lot of food that these animals will need to survive.
I think as I got older and you start to realize that, yeah, most of the sightings are in North America, for example, where the great wilderness areas are forever getting encroached on. And if they're not being encroached on, I mean, there is more footfall now than there ever has been before. So that was probably the first time I had any doubt.
Science operates on rigorous standards of evidence and reproducibility. For Bigfoot to be acknowledged as a real species, concrete and verifiable evidence must be presented, which withstands peer review and scientific scrutiny.
So whoever is making the claim that Bigfoot does exist is the one obligated to provide the evidence. Now, the reason for this is because fundamentally the inverse, which a lot of people might say, if I went up to somebody who loves Bigfoot and I say, Bigfoot does not exist, show me evidence that Bigfoot exists. They might say, well, prove to me that Bigfoot does not exist. Prove it. And in fact, that's impossible. That's something that we just can't do. So the only way we could prove that Bigfoot does not exist is if we simultaneously looked every single place in the world that, Bigfoot could be hiding or could be living. We'd have to overturn every rock, look in every cave, search, every wooded area simultaneously. That's the only way we could demonstrate that. So as you can imagine, that's not really feasible. But in fact, demonstrating that Bigfoot does exist is feasible. We can find evidence of that. We can find, footprints, we can find hair, other kinds of, remains. We could actually capture Bigfoot. And this is the key sort of basis of how all of logic and all of science must work. We're obligated to follow these rules. Because if we don't follow these rules, anybody could make any claim of anything. It's impossible to prove that something does not exist, but it's always possible to prove something does.
Something's going on because you have how many sightings and how many people saying something. Now, I don't know the numbers specifically. I can't quantify how many sightings there are a year or where they are. You have to take into consideration that a certain percentage are mistaken. They're seeing a bear, they're seeing something else. A certain percentage are lying and looking for attention. And then you have a certain percentage of people that are legitimately saying what they're seeing.
Eyewitness accounts form the backbone of the Bigfoot legend, with numerous reports of sightings fueling the belief in this elusive creature's existence. However, from a scientific standpoint, these accounts are fraught with the issues that significantly undermine their reliability.
I mean, not everybody's making this up, are they?
You want to talk to lawyers, they say, eyewitness accounts are very, very shaky. But when you looking at the numbers, there is a certain percentage of people that are seeing stuff that cannot be explained, in my opinion. I don't know what they are, but again, this may sound non-committal. Something's going on, but what it is, I don't know.
And far be it from me to tell anyone else what they have or haven't seen. However, science demands objective and unbiased data. Human perception is notoriously unreliable.
What we're seeing with Bigfoot is exactly what we're seeing with UFOs, and that's exactly what we would expect to see if they did not exist. And that a whole lot of people had a lot of crazy stories, and none of them really line up.
Human perception is highly fallible, and numerous studies in psychology have shown that what we see and remember can easily be distorted by both internal and external factors. Memory is not a perfect recording of events. It is a reconstructive process influenced by biases, prior beliefs, and subsequent information. When someone believes strongly in Bigfoot's existence, their mind is more likely to interpret ambiguous sights and sounds as being related to the creature.
It's really about how your brain interprets, signals that it doesn't understand. I'm very skeptical, so it doesn't really matter what it is. I'm always skeptical of it.
Even the very image of Bigfoot has been deeply ingrained in popular culture since the mid-20th century. Films, television shows, books, and media coverage have shaped the public's perception of what Bigfoot looks like and how it behaves.
100% I was completely convinced, and a lot of these shows did kind of, they didn't say it wasn't real, but they kind of did push it in that direction, like, we don't really know, and and then there's a lot of, you hear different theories and opinions, and I was all in. Again, watching Steve Austin fight Andre the Giant, and then later Ted Cassidy in his Bigfoot suits. I mean, I can still remember lines from those episodes. The Native American guy who was like, my people named him Sasquatch, you called him Bigfoot, as the camera zooms in on the footprint on the ground. So yeah, I was all about that.
This cultural saturation can influence eyewitnesses who might interpret any large unidentified animal or even inanimate objects like shadows and tree stumps as Bigfoot. The power of suggestion is strong, and once the idea of Bigfoot is planted in someone's mind, it can influence their interpretations of natural phenomena. The wilderness areas where Bigfoot is reportedly seen are also home to a wide variety of wildlife, which can easily be misidentified. Cognitive biases, such as confirmation bias, where people notice and remember information that confirms their pre-existing beliefs, plays a significant role in Bigfoot sightings. Additionally, the excitement and adrenaline of thinking one has seen Bigfoot can alter perception and memory. The phenomena of expectant attention can also lead individuals who are actively seeking for Bigfoot to misinterpret visual cues in the environment that support their expectations.
What's the old line from Seinfeld that George Costanza said? It's not a lie if you believe it. And, so what someone is seeing, they are seeing something, but if in their mind, I am seeing a Bigfoot, they are going to come across and say, that's going to be what they believe.
Shared false memories can be reinforced among Bigfoot enthusiasts, leading to a collective certainty that may be built more on social bonds than factual accuracy. The reliability of eyewitness accounts is usually bolstered by physical evidence. In the case of Bigfoot, despite thousands of reported sightings, there is a striking lack of verifiable physical evidence. This lack of physical corroboration casts serious doubts on the reliability of eyewitness accounts.
I mean, I've seen stuff where I'm like, what is that? And then oh, it's a dog, or it's but there's that moment before where your imagination, your mind starts to go away. But again, there's a lot of other cryptids out there. Dogmen, skunk apes, there's yetis. I don't know, people are seeing something that is very interesting. And there are legends and stories, urban legends, about things that happened even before there were settlers in the United States. So I don't know, is it the human psyche about thinking about monsters, or what's in the dark? I mean, we could go down all different types of rabbit holes to explore what it could be, but what is it really? I don't have an answer.
Without more reliable forms of evidence, expert consensus remains skeptical of the existence of Bigfoot.
Lack of fossils doesn't always mean lack of, or doesn't mean that something hasn't been there. You have to imagine as well, there was a period in time where dinosaurs ruled the earth, right? But we only have select species of dinosaurs. We don't have every single one. We don't have an exhaustive list at all. And even with that, there's a lot of screwy stuff that still comes up with fossil discovery. Sometimes they'll find a dinosaur that they think is a new species, and it ends up being just a baby version of a different dinosaur or something like that. There's still, I think there's room there for speculation on why there would not be any Sasquatch or Bigfoot remains.
I've also heard things that there have been bones, there has been fur, there has been DNA tests, but I haven't seen anything on the news. I don't know. I don't go to the Bigfoot conventions, but there's some people that are hardcore into it that, say they have proof in these tests, and then there's a lot of infighting there too. Like, I don't believe what Dr. Jeff Meldrum said, and I don't believe what this other woman who got the DNA testing. I question her methods. I don't know all of those details, but I have heard them. But I would think, this would be one of the biggest stories of the century if they did find some fur that was an inconclusive genetic test. I have yet to see anything on the news. well, then the government's hiding it. I've heard that response. So I don't know.
You have to take them at face value. You have to have faith, whether you want to believe it or not.
While eyewitness accounts of Bigfoot are compelling and often deeply personal, they are not reliable forms of evidence for the existence of this legendary creature. The complexities of human perception, memory, and psychology, combined with a lack of physical evidence and the influences of pop culture, make these accounts highly suspect. For the scientific community and skeptics alike, the Bigfoot phenomena remains a fascinating case study in folklore and human psychology rather than a credible zoological reality.
So I think in China there's another Bigfoot-like creature called the Yeren. And that's what's fascinating about Bigfoot and Sasquatch in general, is that there are so many cultures that have a Bigfoot equivalent.
Known to the world as Bigfoot or Sasquatch, this figure has roamed the collective imagination for generations. But to truly understand the essence of the being, we must journey back to its roots in Indigenous folklore, where it's less a creature of flesh and bone and more a symbol of deeper truths about the world.
There's historical records of encounters with these creatures dating back 115 plus years. They would call it wild man, before it became Bigfoot and Sasquatch and Yeti, Nantinnuk, that's what they call it up in Alaska. It was wild man. And there are many stories of Native Americans encountering these over the years. One that sticks with me is an experiencer named Mel Skahan, who lives up on the Yakima Indian Reservation. And he took something from one of these Bigfoot sites that he should not have. And let's just say he ended up bringing it back at the urging of whatever was out there.
Long before the term Bigfoot captured the imaginations of the world, the indigenous peoples of the region told stories of a large, mysterious being that roamed through these very forests. This creature, known in various tribal languages, was more than just an animal. It was a significant part of their culture and spiritual life.
There are all these different wild man interpretations throughout all these different societies and cultures that have been isolated as well. There's plenty of cultures out there that have never really interacted with other cultures at the time, but yet they have folkloric stories about a big hairy dude hanging out in the woods.
As these stories were passed to non-Indigenous people, the symbolic dimensions of Sasquatch began to fade, overshadowed by a growing fascination with proving its existence. Here, the pursuit of proof misses the fundamental essence of Sasquatch as a symbol crafted not to be uncovered like a hidden treasure. While it may not be a real physical being, this does not diminish its importance or its revered place in these myths. The legend of Sasquatch serves as a vital cultural touchstone, teaching us about the unseen laws of nature and our duty to preserve and respect the world we inhabit. The Bigfoot myth began to take shape in the American consciousness in the mid-20th century, with print media playing a crucial role. Newspapers and magazines, intrigued by the mystery and sensational nature of Bigfoot sightings, began publishing articles that recounted these encounters in vivid detail. These stories often lacked skeptical scrutiny and presented the myth as a tantalizing mystery, laying the groundwork for a cultural phenomenon. Television further entrenched Bigfoot in popular culture. Documentary-style programs and series dedicated to exploring unexplained phenomena, such as In Search of and later Finding Bigfoot, have reached millions of homes. These shows often present the search for Bigfoot as a legitimate scientific endeavor, with teams of experts employing various gadgets to track down the creature. This dramatic presentation, complete with suspenseful music and cliffhangers, keeps viewers engaged and perpetuates the myth regardless of the lack of conclusive evidence. Films, Both documentaries and fictional accounts have also played a significant role. They visualize the creature and dramatize encounters, making Bigfoot appear more tangible and real to audiences. Even when presented as fiction, these portrayals contribute to the myth's plausibility in the public mind. Media commercialization has significantly impacted the Bigfoot legend. The figure of Bigfoot has been used to sell books, documentaries, TV shows, merchandise, and even themed excursions, creating a very profitable Bigfoot industry. This commercial incentive encourages the ongoing interest in the creature and the continual production of content that supports the myth. The line between reality and fabrication blurs easily in the modern digital space, where sensational content can be more about garnering views than factual accuracy.
Again, we may look for different things. You might say, I've seen this footprint, I've seen this fur. There's a biological sample that some group of scientists couldn't identify which animal it came from. And to you might say, well, that's enough. That's enough. But what I would always ask is that, a 95% certainty or only a 5% chance that evidence could be something else? I don't think we've seen sufficient evidence for that. I don't think we've seen anything that adheres to that kind of criteria.
People have been making wild claims about Bigfoot almost as long as the legend has existed. People have claimed they've shot it, that they have one in their freezer. It's been taken around to the state fair as a novelty item. But then why has it not ended up on the examination table for all of science to investigate? That is my question. Is it possible that Gigantopithecus could have been Bigfoot?
Despite the allure of the Gigantopithecus theory, connecting Bigfoot to Gigantopithecus involves numerous scientific inaccuracies and leaps in logic that make this identification highly implausible. Firstly, Gigantopithecus, as known from the fossil record, primarily existed in what is now India, China, and Vietnam, not North America.
Gigantopithecus is a mouthful, but very likely actually. That's one of the theories that I think is the most credible. Maybe not perhaps in North America. The evidence of there being Gigantopithecus over there is scant at best. As a matter of fact, I don't think there is any hard evidence that there was ever Gigantopithecus in America.
The species is known only from a limited number of fossilized teeth and jawbones, which suggest it was indeed large, possibly standing up to 10 feet tall and weighing over 1,000 pounds. However, these remains offer no evidence that Gigantopithecus was bipedal, as Bigfoot is commonly reported to be. Moreover, the diet of Gigantopithecus, inferred from its dental morphology, was largely herbivorous, consisting of bamboo and possibly other fibrous plant materials. This dietary preference would have required a habitat vastly different from the forests of North America, where Bigfoot sightings are typically reported. The temperate, often snowy environments associated with Bigfoot sightings do not align with the warm, forested environments that would have supported a large primate like Gigantopithecus. From an ecological and biogeographical standpoint, the presence of Gigantopithecus in North America presents another significant hurdle. For Gigantopithecus to inhabit North America, it would have had to have survived a migration across the land bridge that once connected Asia with North America. This migration would have had to have occurred during a time when that land bridge was dominated by a tundra environment, unsuitable for sustaining a large herbivorous primate. There is also no fossil evidence to suggest that Gigantopithecus ever made such a migration. Additionally, if Gigantopithecus had survived into the modern era and inhabited North America, we would expect to find substantial fossil records similar to other large mammals. The complete absence of such evidence is a critical strike against this theory. Every known large primate in the Americas, from the bison to the grizzly bear, is well documented in fossil record across various North American sites. Finally, the extinction timeline further complicates the Gigantopithecus Bigfoot connection. Most estimates suggest that Gigantopithecus went extinct around 100,000 years ago, likely due to changing climate conditions and diminishing food resources. This timeline makes it highly unlikely for any remnant population to have survived unnoticed in the modern era, especially without leaving any verifiable evidence of its continued existence. While the idea that Bigfoot could be a surviving Gigantopithecus is intriguing, the scientific realities concerning known facts about it make this theory highly unlikely.
Look, anything's possible. I know that fossils have been found, and some researchers say that it resembles giant ape-like humans. However, people say it also looks like a bear standing on its hind legs. But why then, when samples are tested, don't they come back as bear or Gigantopithecus? I mean, it's possible that these things are an undiscovered species.
The modern era, with its proliferation of cameras and smartphones, could ideally lead to an increase in credible sightings and evidence. However, this has not been the case with Bigfoot.
With DNA analysis, it'd be really easy to validate something like that, and they've all turned out to be hoaxes. It's too big. We will discover more mammals, but they're small. They're like mice and things like that. There's a lot of mice yet to be discovered, but nothing that big.
The photographs and videos submitted as evidence often suffer from poor quality and ambiguous details, making them easy to dismiss by scientific standards. Moreover, the physical evidence, like footprints, has too often been proven to be hoaxes or misidentified animal tracks. As society becomes increasingly digital and disconnected from the natural world, myths like Bigfoot offer a form of escape. They allow people to reconnect with nature and the mystery it holds, even if that connection is rooted in fantasy. Myths and legends also serve psychological needs. They provide simple explanations for complex phenomena, offer comfort and mystery, and even confront deeper existential questions about what else might be out there. Bigfoot stands at the crossroads of this psychological landscape. The Patterson-Gimlin film, shot in 1967 in North American California, purportedly captures a female Bigfoot striding along a riverbank. We've all seen this video.
Is the Bigfoot or the Squatch in the Patterson-Gimlin film a female Sasquatch?
Absolutely. Of course, it's true. I mean, you can't deny that the Sasquatch in the video is definitely well endowed, shall we say. And that has actually lended well to some of the credibility. A lot of people argue that if you were to fake a Bigfoot scene, chances are you would just go with a male, right? Usually that would be the train of thought. I don't know why that is the train of thought, but that is usually the train of thought.
This short piece of footage has become a cornerstone of Bigfoot lore, widely cited by believers as incontrovertible proof of the creature's existence.
As using just the footage, taking nothing else into regard, I think it is very difficult to make an airtight argument in either camp, whether you are looking at a real animal or a guy in a costume. I look at it now with 30 years of professional work building these type of costumes behind me. I see a guy walking in a suit, and there's some little details I see, especially since the footage has been stabilized in 4K, that make me look at different details.
So, was it just someone in a costume? Will you find me the person that made a Bigfoot suit with breasts?
People will say the circumstances surrounding the film's creation are suspect. Roger Patterson, one of the filmmakers, had a noted interest in Bigfoot prior to the incident, having written a book on the subject.
It's also quite convenient that, they went out to look for Bigfoot and found a Bigfoot with kind of really old technology, old cameras.
Moreover, Patterson and Gimlin were alone in the wilderness at the time of the supposed encounter, which conveniently eliminates any independent verification of their claims.
It just so happened that Patterson had, in a book maybe a couple of years prior to this footage, had actually sketched a female Bigfoot in a very similar pose to how he shot it in the film. You could argue that he was directing the film and he wanted it to look exactly like he sketched it.
Critics of the film often point to the appearance of the creature itself, suggesting that it closely resembles a man in a suit rather than an unknown primate species.
From the research that we have done on the podcast, we did come across people saying that at the time that the Patterson-Gimlin film happened, there was traveling kind of circus shows that involved a stage act of a magician transforming a woman into a monkey or an ape-like creature. And it was like, pull the curtain type of thing, and this is what happened. Potentially they could have used one of those suits.
Experts in costume design and special effects have noted that the creature's movements and morphology are not inconsistent with a human wearing a specifically designed suit.
For years, the rumor was that John Chambers had something to do with it. John Chambers was a very famous makeup artist. He did Planet of the Apes. He won the second honorary Oscar for makeup. He had done some work for the government. There was the recent film Argo touches on that. John Goodman played John Chambers. So, he was well known and very revered in my industry. And that he and Tom Berman made a suit that gave it to these guys. But then, you start to learn more about it. And, from my understanding, Patterson and Gimlin didn't have a lot of money, and I doubt they could even afford to even rent the John Chambers costume, let alone how the hell did you get a hold of him? Back then there was no internet, and you had to get the yellow pages. They were in Washington. He was in Hollywood and Burbank. So, that doesn't seem like a likely possibility that they used a professional grade costume. But again, based on the context of the footage, they really wouldn't have needed to.
Notably, the suit could have been constructed using techniques available in the mid-1960s, albeit with a high level of craftsmanship and detailed anatomical understanding.
My specific issue with people that try to justify the Patterson footage as legitimate is the quote, and this really grinds my gears, that Hollywood didn't have the technology back then to do this type of suit, nor do they have the technology today. Sometimes that's together, sometimes it's separate. There will be quotes that, Disney Imagineers couldn't recreate it. Of course they couldn't. That's not what Disney Imagineers did. They did not make costumes. They made audio animatronics. And even to this day, Disney will hire vendors to work on certain things that R&D comes up with and such. But, as a person who has made professional costumes, and I've worn crappy costumes, it looks like a guy in a baggy suit to me, just walking along.
Philip Morris, a costume manufacturer, famously claimed that he sold a gorilla costume to Patterson, which was allegedly modified before being used in the film. Although Morris's claims have not been conclusively proven, they provide a plausible explanation for the film's origins.
Yeah, I think it was Bob Hieronymus that said that he was the guy in the suit. I think they've done some kind of tests to kind of verify whether it could have been him or did it look like him in the suit. As a matter of fact, I think they put him in a suit after the fact, a similar suit, and it just didn't really look right. I think the original footage is too hard to go off scientifically to be able to disprove that it wasn't Bob Hieronymus. And then it's up to you on whether you want to trust his word or not.
The way the creature moves in the film has also been the subject of some scrutiny. Some biomechanics experts argue that the gait and posture of the Bigfoot are distinctly human-like, suggesting a person could mimic these movements while wearing a suit.
Gorilla suits have been made since the 1930s. You have your Hollywood gorilla men, guys like Charlie Gamora, Janos Prohaska, George Barrows, Crash Corrigan. They've been making gorilla suits from the 30s all the way through the 50s. They were on The Incredible Hulk. George Barrow was on the Beverly Hillbillies. And suits of that kind are really comprised of two suits. The first suit is like a foam muscle suit to change the proportions. They'll lower the hips, they'll bulk out the shoulders, and then on top of it goes a fur suit. And these suits aren't glued together. So as you're moving, the suit is going to slide over it. It's not going to be actual muscle flexion, but you're going to see something underneath it. Again, looking at the Patterson footage and staying focused on that, when he's walking, just below his right hip, there is a horizontal wrinkle, and when he takes a step, and this is very evident in the 4K stabilized footage, and there is areas that are tricky even when you're making a custom suit. It's usually the hips, the shoulders. I had also read somewhere that he had put waders on underneath the suit, so it could be a line of demarcation from a hip-high wader. I don't know. It's, again, I can say one thing, somebody else can argue something else, but I can say this with 100% certainty as a professional and as a historian of this stuff. Yes, the technology existed to make a costume at least that good based on the context in which it was shot, which is a shaky 16mm footage.
The film's quality and camera handling also raise questions. The footage is shaky and grainy, which could be attributed to the surprise of stumbling upon a cryptid, but also conveniently obscures detailed analysis. The creature's calm demeanor and the nonchalant manner in which it glances back at the camera have been interpreted by some as too-staged, and not indicative of a wild animal's typical reactions to human presence.
Invariably, there's going to be one or two people that hold a different position. In fact, there is a professional effects artist, a guy named Bill Munns. He did creature suits and creature effects in the early 80s. His most famous thing, I believe, was the Swamp Thing that was made in like 1982-ish. Louis Jourdan was in it. He played a monster, and then Dick Durek played the Swamp Thing creature. And he got out of the business, and he does museum displays and things now, and he is hardcore believer, and he has his professional opinions why he thinks the Patterson footage is genuine. I disagree with him, and as does Rick Baker and Stan Winston, my old boss. I've even heard people talk about specials with these creature effects guys, and I'm not going to get into specifics, but knowing most people and speaking to some that have been on these specials, when you're hired to be on a documentary, you're often encouraged to take a particular stance. Whether or not that's what you truly believe for the script or the beats, you can say that's disingenuous, whatever. I'm just telling you how it's done. And there have been colleagues that have done things that they've said something more or less on one, but, behind closed doors and in the workshop, they're like, dude, no. So, take that for what it's worth. You don't have to believe me. I'm just telling you my personal anecdotal experience. You can call me a liar, whatever.
While the Patterson-Gimlin film remains one of the most evaded pieces of evidence in the Bigfoot saga, the balance of probabilities, considering the potentials for hoaxing, the technological feasibility of the costume design at the time, and the filmmakers' backgrounds, suggests that the film is more likely than not fabricated. Without additional corroborative evidence, the scientific community and skeptics remain justified in their doubts about the film's authenticity, viewing it instead as a compelling piece of folklore rather than a genuine document of an unknown species.
The company I work for is Spectral Motion. It's a special effects company in Southern California. And years ago, they did a film called Exists. And in it, we made a Bigfoot costume. So here's our Bigfoot Exists costume. And this is foam rubber here. And this is a sculpted piece that was then affixed to a muscle suit. So you can see this muscle, this is part of it here. There's another piece that goes over and it gets snapped up the back. So like here's part of the muscle suit. A glove gets pulled over this, and then the fur helps blend everything. And it does come of several parts. It's comprised of several parts. So you've got gloves here. So this is a sculpted glove with fur, and this gets put on. This material, foam rubber, absolutely did exist in 1967. This fur material did not. This is a stretch material that was not available then, but again, you wouldn't need it. It's great to have, and it does help make our suits much better, but looking at that footage, that could have been any gorilla suit that any one of the gorilla guys that I mentioned earlier could have built.
Again, I still won't hang my hat 100% on that not being a Sasquatch, but for me, it becomes a lot harder to swallow that is actually credible and real footage.
The Freeman footage, captured by Paul Freeman in 1994 in the Blue Mountains of Washington State, is another key piece of visual evidence cited by Bigfoot enthusiasts. In the video, what appears to be a large, hairy, bipedal creature is seen walking through a clearing in the forest. Despite its potential implications, several factors suggest that the Freeman footage is more likely a hoax than a legitimate sighting of an unknown primate.
Look, anybody can say what's real or not. I mean, the power of the internet in which we live makes it very, very possible that this could be faked, and we're talking about any footage.
Paul Freeman was a former U.S. Forest Service patrolman who became a dedicated Bigfoot hunter after claiming to have seen the creature in 1982. His deep involvement in the Bigfoot community and his desire to prove the existence of the creature raised potential biases.
Having met Michael Freeman and having shaken his hand and looked him in the eyes and seen what was done to his father's video to restabilize it, to magnetize it, to make it clearer, I think that is legitimate Bigfoot footage, as legitimate as you're going to find.
The appearance of the creature in the Freeman footage has been compared to that of a person in a suit. Experts in costume design and special effects have noted that the proportions and movement of the creature could be replicated with a suit, particularly one that was well crafted to mimic a large primate. The movement of the creature lacks the fluidity and agility that would be expected from a large wild animal, instead displaying a somewhat stiff and human-like gait. The environment in which the footage was taken does not help its case. The Blue Mountains area is relatively accessible and well-traveled, making it an unlikely habitat for an undiscovered large primate to remain hidden. Furthermore, there were no additional pieces of conclusive evidence such as clear footprints, hair samples, or scat found at the site to corroborate Freeman's video.
As far as the rest of these kinds of Bigfoot videos, made by amateurs and people who claim to be famous in the Bigfoot industry, yet all they do is put out videos of Bigfoot encounters, I mean, who knows? Your guess is as good as mine.
The Bigfoot research community is divided on the authenticity of the Freeman footage. While some consider it to be among the strongest evidence for Bigfoot's existence, others, including prominent skeptics and wildlife experts, dismiss it as a hoax due to the reasons mentioned before. The scientific community, which requires rigorous proof for the validation of new species, remains unconvinced without more compelling evidence.
A lot of the time when I'm watching Bigfoot videos and any other kind of cryptid sightings is you're looking for reactions that might be a bit suspect. You're looking for how the subject on the video acts, if it gets caught on video, all that kind of stuff, just to kind of see whether it's credible or not.
The role of media and hoaxes in the perpetuation of Bigfoot's existence cannot be underestimated. Every new piece of evidence, whether later debunked or not, reignites interest and belief. From an ecological standpoint, the existence of a large bipedal primate in North America presents several challenges. Primates, particularly of the size reported for Bigfoot, require a substantial amount of food and a stable prey base. North America's temperate forests, while rich in biodiversity, do not support the biomass density necessary to sustain a large primate population.
And I work in science, so I think sort of mathematically. Now, when we're searching for Bigfoot, a mathematical idea of how we would find evidence or evaluate evidence may not really be as useful. Well, the key thing is that within the search for Bigfoot, different people may value different evidence in different ways. And so, some people may say, well, I've seen this fur, and this fur is different than any animal that we're familiar with or that I can identify. So that's sufficient for me to believe that we have evidence that Bigfoot exists. But the way we think of it in actual statistics in mathematics is we usually build out these models where we use probabilistic percentages. The idea of a probabilistic percentage is you gather a bunch of evidence, you do some testing, you do some experiments, and you say, if I look at the results of those experiments, and the results of those experiments are only possible with a 5% or less chance if the thing we're trying to look for isn't true. So in other words, like if we're looking at Bigfoot, we might say, we found all this stuff, and if there's only a 5% or less chance that all that stuff could exist without Bigfoot existing, then we would usually say, in the scientific world, we might say that's sufficient evidence to say that Bigfoot does in fact exist. And we call that a criteria, or in mathematics it's called alpha. In the search for Bigfoot, how would you evaluate something like that, right? So you can't say, oh, there's only a 5% chance that Bigfoot does not exist given that we have fur, given that we have footprints, and so on. So each individual who's searching for Bigfoot has to use their own evaluation methodology for looking at the evidence and for making that decision. But the way I think of it is that even if that's in science, even if we're usually using a mathematical model, the idea is really that alpha, that criterion that we're using, is pretty strict. We kind of lean toward not wanting to make a mistake, not wanting to say Bigfoot does exist when in fact he doesn't. We lean toward what we call sort of skepticism, or the assumption that the burden of proof has not been met yet. And so I don't, a lot of people who are maybe Bigfoot enthusiasts or alien enthusiasts or other kinds of things that are, under scientific debate, look at people who don't view the existence of those things. They call them skeptics. So a lot of people are self-described as skeptics as well. And I don't really like that idea because it sort of creates a conflict between the two groups. Like, so for the people who are, Bigfoot enthusiasts who say that Bigfoot does exist, I don't like the idea that there's a conflict. I, as a scientist, also really want to find evidence. I would be very excited to find evidence that Bigfoot does exist. I'd be very excited to find evidence that aliens do exist. But, until it meets that scientific criterion, that strict criterion, that burden of proof, I'm not willing to make that leap. I'm not willing to just jump in a sort of like a faith-based idea. I adhere to the rules of logic.
I just want to know if it's real. I know people try to prove it and everything, and I'm not trying to prove it, but I just want to see it.
I think that does go to speak to human nature, because if you can go back, let's just say just to the Greek myths, like the Titans and the creatures, the Gorgon, the underworld. It's there was a time like the Hydra, like those animals, those things did exist, that people really believed that. You can get into dragons, and we can go off on that tangent about dragons and how every culture has some type of theory or myth about a dragon, and those have to come from somewhere. But I do think it is human nature to kind of wonder about different things and what's really in the dark, and why should we be afraid of the dark, and how these stories have just endured for such a long period of time. I think it does speak to human nature. And for some people, it speaks to them more, people like myself that love Halloween and the scary and are drawn to that stuff. Where other people are like, yeah, it's cool, but whatever, I want to build cars. So, but every culture has something about something scary or something weird or something mythological. So I do think it does come from the human psyche.
So why, in this day and age, where the once unseen depths of the oceans and the far reaches of space are revealed, does the belief in an undiscovered giant primate in North America's forests persist?
I think it's just the whole mystery behind it. No one knows if it's real or not. People want to see what's out in space, and we reach out with radio signals and stuff like that. Why? So we know what's out there. I want to know what's in my backyard.
I first heard of course, Bigfoot listening to the legendary Art Bell on late night radio. I can remember many nights him talking with people who have encountered the beast, who have hunted the beast, who have found all sorts of evidence, from footprints to hairs and scat, and the list goes on.
Belief in Bigfoot can also be seen as a form of modern folklore, a story passed down through generations that has become part of a community's identity. For some, it is a link to a simpler, more mysterious world that contrasts sharply with our current reality.
We can't close. I have an open mind about stuff like that. I mean, people see a lot of weird things out there and can't be explained by science.
Community plays a significant role in the perpetuation of the Bigfoot legend. For many, the search for Bigfoot is not just about finding the creature itself, but about the camaraderie and the shared experience of the hunt. In these gatherings, stories are shared and bonds are formed, reinforcing the belief through collective affirmation. In an era where satellite imagery can pinpoint the location of a particular tree and drones can survey inaccessible terrain, the fact that there is no definitive evidence of Bigfoot's existence is increasingly damning. The scientific community values consensus and peer review, processes by which research is evaluated and scrutinized by experts in the field. To date, no study confirming the existence of Bigfoot has passed this rigorous examination. The claims and evidence presented often fall short of the scientific standard required for acceptance. The lack of verifiable evidence combined with the ecological and biological implausibilities leads the scientific community to reject the existence of Bigfoot as anything more than a myth.
But the interesting thing about that would be that maybe these stories of Sasquatch and Bigfoot are fireside stories told by tribes, maybe to warn people of big primates in the woods, all this kind of stuff. So you would then wonder if the First Nations people who crossed some land bridge to get into North America, if they carried that folklore with them, and the legend of the Sasquatch was preserved that way. So while there is nothing really contemporary hard for Bigfoot, I mean, you could say Patterson-Gimlin if you're on the believer side of that. But yeah, I think that could be a reason why Bigfoot folklore legends have survived. Potentially because humans did come up against either big primates, or Gigantopithecus, or perhaps even, there's probably room for Neanderthals and things like that in there as well. These stories, obviously, over time, they lose the accuracy and they lose the small details. So some of these stories could simply have just been about maybe Neanderthals,
From the misty coast of the Pacific Northwest to the remote hills of Appalachia, the story of Bigfoot has transcended its mythical origins to become a symbol of mystery, a reflection of our fascination with the unknown, and an enduring expression of our desire to believe in something greater than ourselves. Through art, cinema, and commerce, Bigfoot has inspired creativity and an entrepreneurial spirit. It has become a canvas onto which we project our fears, our hopes, our wildest imaginations. Festivals, dedicated museums, and even academic courses study the phenomena, not merely for proof of some elusive beast, but to understand what Bigfoot tells us about ourselves and our society. But perhaps the most profound impact of Bigfoot lies in its ability to connect us through shared stories and collective endeavors into the wilderness. It brings people together, offering a common narrative that spans generations and geographies. In this sense, Bigfoot is real in its capacity to inspire, to entertain, and to provoke curiosity.
I look forward to the day when Bigfoot hunters, when people searching the woods provide really concrete evidence of Bigfoot, so that we can all be excited about that.